Welcome everyone to Marigold for a night of storytelling. It's so great to see everybody. My name is Andrew Shelfo, and thank you. I only had to pay a little bit for that to happen, so that's good. So this storytelling show tonight, I'm so awesomely grateful to have 7 awesome storytellers from all over the country, including, we can call it international because we have a storyteller from Canada as well. Yeah, we do. The theme for this storytelling event is life and the pandemic. And it occurred to me as I was trying to figure out what the theme for the show should be, it occurred to me how much we've forgotten about how much the pandemic sucked, right? Whether it's over or not, you know? And I was really reminded of this about a week or so ago. I teach, and it was a snow day, but of course it wasn't really a snow day because we had to do it on Zoom. And I spent an entire year teaching on Zoom to international kids while I had other kids in front of me. And my classroom was one half of a basketball court. And every day I would go to class and I was reminded of that scene from Revenge of the Nerds where they get kicked out of their dorm and they have to, they're living there, right? Basketball's floating over. And the snow day just reminded me of how much that all sucked. And I'm like, okay, this is a good theme for a storytelling show. Because I think that we've forgotten a lot about what happened in the last 2 years. I may be the only one who's saying this, but I feel like I have a 2-year gap of things. Like I have no recollection of things. So this is an opportunity to remind us all of just how wonderful or how bad it was. One thing that I won't forget about the pandemic is storytelling, because it was over the course of the pandemic that I met all the storytellers that you're going to meet tonight. And for the majority of the storytellers, we would meet on Zoom once or twice a week, and we would actually go over stories and help each other tell stories. And it was really an amazing experience. And these are some of the finest storytellers that I know, and I'm thrilled that they've come to Easthampton. So I want to give them a round of applause before we even get started. So a couple of notes before we get started. This is not a story slam. Some of you may be familiar with that thing where people get up and tell stories and the audience then votes on which story is the best. Instead, this is a celebration of storytelling. Not all these tellers are really going to tell stories about how awful things were during the pandemic. They have a variety of stories, and some of them actually say some really nice things. So it's going to be a good night. Each of the tellers will have up to about 8 minutes to tell a story, just to set the expectations for it. Before we get started with the first teller, I do want to give a little bit of this. I call this an invocation. I don't know if you're familiar with the story, the book. It's called The Story of B. There's just a wonderful quote about storytelling that I wanted to share. This is where storytelling began. This is where people began to read the world as a collection of stories. There isn't a child anywhere in the world, in any culture of the world, that doesn't want to hear a story. And everywhere in the world, in every culture of the world, a story is a story is a story. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Sean Wellington. Sean Wellington is a displaced New Yorker who currently lives in North Carolina. He is the founder of Grit, True Stories That Matter, which produces, among other things, the Mental Health Happy Hour and the 99-Second Story Slams. Sean is also the host of the Suicide Noted podcast, where he's been having candid conversations with suicide attempt survivors since the summer of 2020. He enjoys pickleball, dance, and whiskey, and sometimes doing those things simultaneously. Welcome, Sean.
So it is the late March of 2020, locked down, and I, like many of you, I'm starting to lose my mind a little bit. And so when I get an email from a local nonprofit, they say, do you want to help us out, deliver some food to senior citizens? I'm like, Absolutely. There's almost nothing I can do to help these days. I can do that. I'm relatively young, relatively healthy. I've got a car, 100%. So I show up on Thursday, just like the email says, at 10:30. And when I get there, I see that everybody who's working there is wearing a mask. This is North Carolina, where I live. Late March 2020. Some people are wearing a mask. I'm not. They're also all wearing name tags. And I see this guy named Larry. Larry motions me over. He says, "What's your name?" I say, "Hey, Larry, my name is Sean." He looks on his clipboard. He says, "Hey, Sean, you're matched up with Dottie." I say, "Dottie? This is fantastic. I'm going to be delivering food to Dottie. I can do something that really helps. I'm feeling wonderful." And then he says, "So why aren't you wearing a mask?" And I'm thinking to myself, this isn't really a question, is it? You know, I'm thinking, Larry, I'm volunteering. I'm going to bring food to Dottie. I don't have to do anything more. I don't have to wear a mask. I get credit for that. Let's just move on. Let's get on with it. Now, he's shaking his head a little bit. Larry's a big dude. He's the kind of guy you don't want shaking his head at you. Takes the box of food, brings it to my car, opens the truck, puts the box of food in my truck. He says, "Sean, wait right here." He crosses the street, goes to his car, comes back. He says, "Wear this." He's got a mask in his hand. "You got to protect Dottie." I'm thinking to myself, Larry, this little blue flimsy mask is not going to protect Dottie. What's going to protect Dottie and what's going to help Dottie is I bring her the food so she doesn't starve and she can eat food. So let's get on with it. He says, "You also got to protect your kids." I don't tell Larry that I just don't have any kids. I just nod and I say, "Okay, for Dottie and for the kids." And I go in my car and my door is almost shut and he says, "Hey, Sean." I said, "Yeah, Larry. I got a question." "Sure." Now, this is one of those questions that when you hear it, you can't ever unhear it. He leans in, he says, "You got grandkids?" Now look, I don't know if you've ever been punched in the face really, really hard, and then had your face dunked under water, and then kept there for a while. No, I think he's still talking. I hear kids, I hear grandkids, something about his family. At some point, I sort of shake my head no to his question. I point to the mask that's now on the passenger seat. Thumbs up for Doris and the kids, and I close my door, and I drive to Doris's house, and I ring on Dottie's house. I ring on the doorbell, and got my mask on. She answers the door. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, keeping my promise. She lets me in. She's lovely. She takes the food and she goes into her kitchen. I could see a couple framed photos. It looks like her, probably her husband, looks like kids, and looks like grandkids, and they're all smiling, and they're all happy, and they're all well-dressed, and she comes back and thanks me, and I say, "Of course," and I leave. It felt great. Now, I should tell you that on the drive to Doris's place, and then after, from Doris's place to my place, which is about a 15-minute drive, I can only think about one thing. In fact, that one thing is a word, and the word isn't actually kids. What the word is grandkids. Now, am I old enough to have grandkids technically, like biologically? Sure. And you know what? I'm sure it would be a wonderful thing if you have grandkids. I'm sure you love it. It would be great to have that big kind of family and have family vacations and going away on vacations and dinners and smiles and joy and gifts and laughter. And you know who has that, I'm sure? Larry and Dottie. And I'll tell you what, if you were to see those two, either of them, if you looked at them, you would say to yourself, you know what? They look like they have grandkids. They look like they're grandparents. In fact, they even look like they should have grandkids. They look like it. Now, my life has not worked out that way, and that is okay. But if I am not that guy, the one with that big family and kids and grandkids, then I do not want to look like that guy. In fact, I will do almost anything not to look like that guy. In fact, you know what? I don't think I look like that guy. Do you think I look like that guy? Do me a favor, don't answer that. So I go to CVS. I got to make a stop before I go home. I park the car. The mask is on the passenger seat. Now, Dottie is not here, and there are no kids around, but I don't want Larry shaking his head at me anymore. I got to start wearing the damn mask. So before I put it on, I'm looking in the mirror for a moment. I don't know if you've ever done this. I'm trying to see me how other people see me. You know? And when I say other people, I don't actually mean other people. I mean one other person whose name is Larry. And I've got to tell you, I don't see it. I'm not that guy. I don't look like that guy. So I put my mask on, I go into CVS, I get my stuff, I go up to the register. There's a young lady working there. She's young. She could be my daughter, and she starts ringing the items up. And then she says, can I see some ID? Something with your date of birth. Oh my God. She thinks I'm under 21. Yeah, of course you can have my ID. And I give her the ID because she's ringing up this cheap bottle of Merlot, and I'm thinking, she gets it. What I mean by that is she sees me not only the way I want to be seen, she sees me the way I actually am. She sees truth. Fuck Larry. She gives me my receipt and my stuff. I start to leave. Now, there's nobody else in the store, only a couple people. They're not in line. She's talking with one of her colleagues. I stop. I say, hey, do I look like a teenager? I mean, do I look like one of these local college kids? And she says, no, it's policy. Fair, I know. All right, I'm not that young. I don't look that young. But another question. I'm sure there are people that come into this store, they buy alcohol, let's say the kind of person who looks like they have grandkids, that kind of person, and you don't ID them. She says, sometimes I don't ID people, that's true. Then I ask the question, do I look like I could have grandkids? She says, you have grandkids? I said, no. I tell her what happened a couple hours ago with Larry. So I say, no, I don't have grandkids. Now, what I need from this young lady right now, more than anything else in the world, is for her to tell me that Larry, this lovely guy with a big smile, he works at a nonprofit, he gave me a mask. I need her to tell me that Larry is wrong. I need her to do it without the mask on, just like Larry saw, so I break my promise, and I take the mask off, and I say, look her right in the eye, I say, do I look like I could? She looks at her colleague, she giggles a little bit, psh, no. Now I say, thank you very much. I'm gonna be shopping here a lot more often moving forward. Get in my car, I go home, I pour a big glass of that red wine. And it is so absolutely absurd that this morning I was a grandfather, and this afternoon I was a teenager. And I know it's not that far away where I'm gonna look like that guy if I don't already, and wearing a mask will not make a difference. Am I okay with that? Maybe one day. But for now, I pour myself another big glass because I'm gonna finish that big, cheap bottle of Merlot. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Sean. That was a great way to kick off this night. That was awesome. I think we all either know or have met a Larry, and I really just like that idea of, I'm volunteering, Larry. Just give me some space. So thank you, Sean. That was great. Our next storyteller, her name is Angela Combest, and she told her first story about a date gone very wrong for NEPM's Valley Voices in February of 2020. And for those of you who know, and those of you who don't know, next Thursday, the next iteration of Valley Voices will be happening right here in Marigold Theater. Since that day, she's been far more successful at storytelling than dating. And when she isn't telling stories, she's traveling to as many Springsteen shows as possible, and she just got back from seeing the Boss in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She also serves as the Marketing and Development Director of the Chester Theater Company. Please welcome Angela Cumbest.
It is September of 2020, and I'm standing in a parking lot in Hartford, Connecticut. In a corner, there is a microphone stand, and on either side, there's just a plain old living room floor lamp. Behind that is Interstate 84 and a set of train tracks. And there's the constant dull roar of the cars and trucks going by, an occasional horn. And I have to grit my teeth every time a train goes by because of the sound of metal on metal. People are showing up with masks on, carrying folding chairs, and they're spacing themselves 6 feet apart. I am going to be the first storyteller at a storytelling show in a parking lot in Hartford, Connecticut, in the middle of a global pandemic. I am going to be telling a story that's been buried in here since the early 90s. It's a story about my time as a graduate teaching assistant. It's a story about a student in my class who was blind, who played trumpet and marched in the Alabama marching band. It's a story about how on our last day together, he asked if he could feel my face so that he could see the person he was in class with for the entire semester. This is only the second time I've told a story in front of live people, and I am swallowing, and my fingertips are cold, and I am so nervous. But I've got this. I've got this because I've been getting some really, really good coaching from some friends that I met online a few months before. In February of 2020, I told my first story, the one Andrew just mentioned. It was a pretty good story about a very bad date. And at the end of the night, when they tallied up the votes, I had finished third. Andrew finished second, by the way. I had finished third, and I had earned my place in the Grand Slam, and I was so excited because the minute I got off stage, all I wanted to do was tell more stories. And even though I knew when we got to the Grand Slam, I was not going to win, that was not in the cards, but I had time to work on my story, and it was going to be better this time. And then I was going to be able to stand on the stage of the Academy of Music in front of a sold-out crowd of hundreds of people. I was so excited. And then, about a month later, on March 16th, 2020, I got in my car and I drove out to my office to get the mail because there were rumblings of a 2-week shutdown. And while other people were going to Costco and Big Y and they were stocking up on Clorox wipes and toilet paper, I prepared in a slightly different way. I filled my car up with gas. That one made some sense. And on my way home, I stopped at 4 different dispensaries, and I picked up all of the chocolates and all of the gummies that I was legally allowed to buy. Because if I was going to be stuck in my house, I was thinking that the edibles just might help. And then it stopped. Everything just stopped. And I was in my house, and suddenly things like meeting new people and going on dates, that was off the table. Not that it had been going well at all anyway. And things that I had tickets for, they were all canceled. And then 2 weeks became 3 weeks, became 4 weeks. And I was sitting on my couch, grief-eating batches of homemade granola, so maybe those edibles weren't the best damn idea I ever had. And then sometime in April, I saw on Facebook there was a notice, a really well-known storyteller, he was going to be offering an online storytelling class, 6 weeks. So I whipped out my credit card. And not too long after that, one evening I sat down at my computer and I signed in for our Zoom class. And there were 6 of us plus the teacher. And we were playing storytelling games, and we were telling stories, and we were learning intimate details about each other. I learned about Steph's habit of offering rides to people who were waiting at bus stops in Chicago. I learned about Kwong's childhood obsession with Jackie Chan. And Jeremy told a story about his dad. And I learned that if you put a heartfelt motherfucker in the right place, it's really gonna improve your dialogue. And we were having a really great time. This was something that I had to look forward to every week. And so as we got closer and closer to the end of our 6 weeks together, we asked our teacher, can we do it again? Will you sign us up for another 6 weeks? And he agreed. And so we signed on for our next 6 weeks. And we were signing on from Chicago, from Seattle, from DC, from Singapore, from Australia, and me here in Florence, Massachusetts. And we were telling more stories, and we were playing more games. And as we got closer to the end of that 6 weeks, we all realized the same thing. We don't want this to end. So our teacher left us, but we kept meeting. Next month, it will be 3 years. I was on Zoom with them last night. I have 5 friends that I have never met in person. I have never shared a plate of fries with any of them. I have 5 best friends I've never been able to give a hug to. I would want any one of them in my lifeboat. In fact, they were my lifeboat. I'm one of the lucky ones. I did not lose anyone that I loved to the pandemic. I lost a lot. We all lost a lot. But when people ask me what I did during that time and how it was for me, I don't tell them about the dates I didn't get to go on. I don't tell them about the concerts I missed. I don't even tell them about the deafening silence in my house. What I tell them is that I have 5 people in my life that I could not have met in any other way at any other time. I'm one of the lucky ones. Thank you.
That was awesome. I don't know if you could hear, but over there on the storyteller couch, which is what that is over there, there's lots of going on, because Angela did a great job of kind of capturing not just what the pandemic was like, but the special relationships that developed. So that was awesome, Angela. Thank you very much. She also captured very well the idea that doing this is hard. It may look easy because all these people over here can make it look easy, but standing up here and telling a story is very difficult, and I love that description of the parking lot in Hartford. I think I might have been in that parking lot too, so thank you for that. Our next storyteller is Mark Modral, and he's a computer programmer from Littleton, Massachusetts. And he started telling stories in public in 2012 because, as he says, he ran out of relatives who hadn't heard that one before. He's won story slams at the Moth, Mass Mouth, and a couple of other places. He's also been featured on WGBH's Stories from the Stage, If you don't know what that is, that's something you should look up because they have a lot of fantastic stories on that show, and a number of these tellers have been on it. And he counts himself blessed that he's occasionally invited to speak with other much better tellers at great venues like this one. Please welcome Mark.
I think so. Please don't hate me, but I actually kind of liked the pandemic. I mean, survival of the fittest is not always about who's tallest, strongest, best looking. Sometimes it's just who's in the right spot when the worm turns. I mean, when the meteor hit, the dinosaurs died and the voles survived. Who knew the pandemic would advantage the mildly misanthropic or the sartorially stunted? It's February 2020. I fly out to California to see my sister. It's the week before I'm starting a new job. There's something going around, so I wear a face mask on the plane both ways, and I am the only one. Of the thousands of people I see in the airports, I am the only one. My new job, it's in an office. Now, for the last decade, I've been working from home 4 days a week, but I was like, I did 25 years in an office. How bad can it be? They start their meetings exactly at 9 o'clock. So I have to drive at the height of rush hour. I have to get up an hour or two earlier, and it's taking 2 hours out of my day to commute. The office is one of these newfangled fancy ones. The cubicles are all really tiny. If we just all reach out our hands, we can do a rendition of We Are the World. The walls are like 3 feet high. So all day long, anywhere you look, it is in someone's face. There is an infinite supply of Captain Crunch out of the hamster feeder in the kitchen. After a month, I have my answer. It sucks. I'm getting up earlier and earlier. I'm getting home later and later. There's no time for exercise. I'm gaining weight. I'm miserable. I'm starting to think, maybe I made a mistake. And then the pandemic hits. One day they come in and they say, why don't you all just go home and work from home for a while? After a few weeks, they sublet our office building in Waltham. There is nothing for us to go back to. But the meetings, they're still at 9 o'clock. But they're just on Zoom. The marketing department always starts theirs like 20 minutes early because they play Trivial Pursuit. In the all-company meetings, it's always the marketing guy saying, come on, everybody, let's all turn our cameras on. These suckers are social addicts, and they are in withdrawal. All the engineers are like, fuck no. I get 2 hours of my day back. I make up the back bedroom like one of those pods in the movie WALL-E, just bolsters all around. When they're playing Trivial Pursuit, I lift weights. We have an exercise cycle in the basement, and now I have time to use it. We have burnt through 2 elliptical machines, and we have had to because we have watched every episode of every season of every baking show on the Food Network. Twice, at least. I lose 20 pounds. I don't have to buy office clothes anymore. I'm rarely out of sweatpants. I haven't had a cold in 3 years. 6 feet apart, I will go 60. I regularly forget where I have left my shoes. My car battery has died twice because I haven't moved it in a month. I am in hog heaven. I kind of miss storytelling, but even that adapts. We go on Zoom, and in Zoom, you can't really see the audience, but I only have to dress from the waist up. One night, I do a show in New Jersey, and I do a show in Dorchester in the same night. And we get to tell stories with people from all over the world. It's like, hey, Toronto, I am living my dream. The last 2 years, though, everyone else has totally lost their shit. People panicked, they fled the cities. That allowed us to finally sell my mom's old place. People's behavior has gotten absolutely awful. They have completely lost all sense of appropriate behavior. You can see it in school board meetings, grocery stores, every day. I have been an antisocial person my whole life. I know where the line is for minimum acceptable behavior. I am ready. This is my golden age. And now it's coming to an end. Things are opening up, and that's okay, I guess. More and more people are self-identifying as jackasses, and that's always helpful. Companies are starting to haul people back into the office. Social butterflies are pollinating. My company told all the employees in California, move to Jacksonville or you're fired. Now, in the last couple of years, my own personal thinking about Florida has evolved. It's evolved from, I'm not going to spend my money in Florida, to, good Lord, you couldn't pay me to go to Florida. Well, it's not exactly true, you could, but that amount is unlikely to ever show up. And I am afraid they're going to drop this ultimatum on me. Like the vole, I didn't conquer the world. I can't take credit because I just happened to be adapted for a pandemic environment. The world just fell apart and it left me a hole. And that hole is shrinking. Voles are the bottom of the food chain. Again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Every time I hear someone tell a story, it's really interesting to hear. I learn something new. And I had always thought that misanthropy was a binary state, like either you are or you aren't. But the idea of being mildly misanthropic, I like that. So I'm gonna steal that. Thank you for that, Mark. Our next storyteller is a newcomer to live storytelling. David Fromm is the author of a sports memoir called Expatriate Games about his short-lived career as a semi-pro basketball player in the Czech Republic. I hope I can get the microphone up high enough for him. He's also written a novel called The Duration about a rhinoceros buried in the Berkshires. Please welcome Dave Fromm.
So I was walking the dog when I got a text from my wife that said, did you use the downstairs bathroom today? We've been married a long time. We don't have many secrets, but sometimes I like to fan the flames of mystery. So I said, why do you ask? And she said that there was a little bit of water on the floor right by the base of the toilet. It was not a big deal. She wiped it up. This was Saturday, December 2020. And after a year of disease and despair and disorientation, I was in the market for radical positivity. With the right mix of faith and patience, I believed any problem could be solved, any mystery unraveled, even the darkest clouds could have a silver lining, blah, blah. So I went back to the house and I checked, and there was more water on the floor right by the base of the toilet. So I figured what I would do is drain the tank, and then there'd be no more water to leak out. So I turned that little knob on the floor because I'm not a plumber, but I figured that brought the water to the tank. And then I flushed the toilet, but I didn't check the bowl first, and that was a mistake because the bowl was full of sewage. And the sewage water began to rise. Maybe you know that feeling. It's a scary feeling because you're sort of like, is it going to stop? Can I stop it? But you can't stop it. You just kind of wait and hope. So I waited and I hoped, and the water stopped. It smelled terrible. The water stopped right before the lip of the toilet bowl. And I rushed over to this useless little closet we have off the kitchen where we have these things we never use because sometimes there's a plunger in there. And I grabbed that. And my wife found some Drano under the sink that she didn't remember buying. We thought maybe it came with the house. And she said, I think it's expired. And we said, I'm not sure it expires. And my daughter said, oh, that stuff works great. And I made a note to ask her about that because she was 10. But it wasn't the time or the place for that. So I poured the Drano into this full bowl of sewage, and then I kind of gently inserted the plunger, and I plunged a couple times. And the water seemed to go down for a second, and I thought, great, this is going to work. We can get back to our Saturday. But then we heard what sounded like a groan coming from like the abdomen of our house. And the water in the bowl began to like churn or roil, and then it began to rise again. And it rose and it rose and it rose with the inevitability of fate. It rose with the callous indifference of the natural world. And it rose until gallons and gallons of sewage water was spilling out of the bowl and onto the floor. And I couldn't stop, and I wanted to scream like a child. So we sent the kids upstairs to grab every towel except the 4 best ones. Everything else. And we kind of tried to make barricades, but we couldn't because we have a really, really old house, and there's not a single floor in this house that is level. And so it's like an M.C. Escher drawing, right? So the water was kind of slaloming around in the kitchen and towards the pantry and then towards the TV room. And my wife was on the phone with our plumber, and she was speaking in a tone of voice that I recognized as one that I myself had used years earlier when her water broke. And it was kind of calm, but with a little vibrato, you know? And the plumber said, yeah, this is happening a lot during the pandemic with everybody at home, especially if you have a teenager. And I thought that was a little bit TMI. And he said, it could be anything. It could be a blockage in the main pipe that goes to the road. And he didn't have the tools for that. But he gave us the number of an emergency service we could call if we thought this was an emergency. And I was like, yeah. So my wife called that number and left a message. And I raced down to the basement because we have these 2 valves down there. And one of the valves controls the water that goes to the house. And the other valve controls the water that goes to the sprinkler system. And I always get these valves confused, so years ago, I went down there with a piece of tape, and I put the tape around one of the valves, and I meant to write home or sprinkler, but I didn't have a pen at the time, and I never got back to it. So now whenever I go down there, I have to guess which one I put the tape on, and then guess which way is off. So I turn the valve with the tape, and I rush back upstairs, and I try the faucet in the kitchen, and it's dry, and I feel good about having guessed right. But the feeling doesn't last because I'm standing in 2 inches of sewage. At this point, my wife, the plumbers called back, and they said we can be there, but not for 3 to 5 hours. My wife went upstairs to light some scented candles and weep silently. And the kids just fled. And I closed the door to the bathroom, even though it didn't do a thing to stop the flow of sewage. It just made me not see it. And we had a Roomba in there, and the Roomba was like, "Don't leave me here." And I was like, I'm sorry, Roomba. And I closed the door. And I felt so helpless. I felt like such a pawn to fate. I mean, what kind of a cruel God traps you in your house for a year and then pulls a stunt like this? So I went down to the basement, and I said, I can figure something out in here. I can apply myself. And we had this overflow basin in the basement that I'd never really noticed before. I don't even know what it's for, really. But it was full to the brim with this pungent sludge. And I thought, is it possible that there's some blockage at the bottom of this overflow basin? Is that contributing to the chaos upstairs? And I know that's not how pipes work. But I was desperate, so I took off my sweatshirt and I rolled up my sleeve, and I reached down through this 2 feet of sewage, and I found the drain, and I kind of went like that with my fingers, and nothing, like the water didn't go down at all. So I withdrew my hand and I kind of held it over here. And then I remembered that I'm right-handed. And I had this idea that I'd go take a shower, like a really long hot shower, but we had turned the water off to the house. And the guy said, whatever you do, don't turn it back on. And then all of the sewage water that was on the kitchen floor above me began to seep through the floorboards and the vent pipes and just rain down on top of me. Yeah, and so I sat on the basement steps for like 3 hours and tried to play Words with Friends left-handed and like not touch my face. And I thought, isn't this a fitting way for this year to end? You know, kind of alone and trapped in this shit sauna. But then, the emergency plumber showed up, and it was just one guy, but he was so competent and reassuring, and he opened the pipes, and he used a little camera to show us where the roots were growing in the lawn, and he said, you guys use Charmin, don't you? I thought that was like next level forensics. And then he used a little turbine thing to cut the roots, and the minute he cut the roots, I could hear all the water in the house just begin to flow back out, and it was the most joyful sound in the world. And I wanted to hug him, and I would have if I hadn't been covered in sewage. And so he packs up his stuff, and I give him this big check, and as he's about to leave, I say, it's gonna smell like this for a while, isn't it? And he said, silver lining, if you can smell it, it means you're not sick. Thank you.
All right, just a quick announcement. The kitchen is now open for those of you who are hungry. Thank you, David. That was great. There's no kitchen here, in case you're wondering. Our next storyteller is Shweta Bhatt. She is a consultant, speaker, writer, and artist who serves as a guide for those who want to harness their voice. After spending 6 years in finance, Shweta realized her true calling was in helping people find more compassion, connection, and resilience within themselves as they navigate significant life changes. She uses the craft of storytelling, public speaking, and writing to share her art with the world through @Beej of Shwet and shwetabhatt.com. Please welcome Shweta Bhatt.
Is the subject of an email that has just made its way into my inbox from my dad, who's sitting down the hall on a conference call. I open it. There's a Word doc. I open the Word doc, and at the top, in big, bold letters, is my name. And then underneath it is a pretty amateurly cropped photo of me in a sari. I keep reading. There's my age, and then my height, and my weight, what caste I belong to, my astrological sign, what school I went to, what I graduated in, my occupation. There's a whole paragraph that details my life's philosophy. There's my interests and my hobbies, and then a list of what I might be looking for in a partner. This is my marriage resume. My parents want me to get married. I was 23 years old. I had just moved to New York City. It was my birthday. And so my parents, they drove down to celebrate. And I didn't have a table yet, so birthday dinner, it was on the ground. And before I could put a morsel of food in my mouth, they looked at me, ready to talk. Shweta, you are 23 years old. You have graduated college. You have a good job. It's time for the next step. What are you looking for in a life partner? Now, They had had a very similar conversation with their parents at the same age. And they believed this was actually the next step. But me, I had no idea. And before I could say that to them, they asked me a series of close-ended questions. Indian? Yes. Brahmin? Of course. Vegetarian? Why not? Taller? A couple inches. Older? A couple years. Location? America. I don't know how genuine I was in the answers that I was giving them, but I knew the answers they expected to hear. And I was not trying to entertain any discussion or any argument based on any disagreements we might have. So before they could ask me another question, I said, hey, look, Mom, Dad, I am 23 years old. And for all of my life, I have been known as your daughter. And before I spend the rest of my life being some guy's wife, I want to know who I am. And New York is my opportunity to do that because I have only ever tried to rise to everybody else's expectations. I mean, I am so focused on making people proud of me, of getting some sort of external validation that I don't even know what I want or what I want to do or who I am. And so I'm hoping New York might just let me do that. And my parents love me. So even though they were probably confused, they said, okay, we can talk about this later. Well, later has come. 6 years to be exact. I am 29 years old. I have moved out of New York City back home to Burlington, Massachusetts. I watch NCIS with my parents before I go to sleep. I have to tell them everywhere I'm going and every time I am coming home. I am unemployed by choice, and it is the middle of a pandemic. This is not the life I expected to be living at 29 years old, and I don't like it. And my parents, they're worried because their 29-year-old daughter, she's not married, she's not engaged, she's not even dating, when all of their friends' kids are and have already bought a house or have a child. What they don't know is I have been dating. I mean, not that much, but I have dated before. And every time I meet somebody, I try to become them. Like the podcasts they listen to, I listen to. The songs they like, I memorize every single lyric. The sports teams they watch, I know all of the stats. See, I've never really thought I was all that lovable as myself. So I always just try to be the perfect version of what that person wanted. And I do it really, really well for a couple of months. And then I don't feel good about myself anymore. And I feel like I lose a little bit, and so I leave. Now, I can't tell my parents this. They wouldn't understand because I don't know if I want to get married. It scares me to think I might just completely lose who I am. I don't know how to be me. And every time somebody calls my parents with a prospective match for me, I say no. And it's not because I don't think they're a good person or I don't like having conversations with people. It's just because I don't want to disappoint them and I don't want to disappoint me. But my parents, they get upset. Almost as upset as I am getting reading this sheet of paper. It makes me seem like a freaking caricature. It gives no context on the past 29 years I have lived of my life. Look, my weight, nobody realizes how many years it has taken me to get to a place where I finally love the body that I'm in. In that occupation, nobody realized I left my 6-figure job because it drained me of every ounce of sparkle that I might have. The school that everybody praises me for going to made me feel like the stupidest person in the world for so long. My life's philosophy, that's an accumulation of adversity after adversity. My interests, she likes storytelling and poetry and cooking. This is bullshit. These aren't interests. These are my lifelines. I mean, it is how I have healed myself to get to a place where I finally can share myself to the world pretty damn authentically. So I walk down the hall to my dad and I tell him, hey, delete it. Look, I know you love me and you are looking out for me. I get it. You want me to get married. I want to get married one day, sure. But this isn't how we're going to do it. I don't want you involved anymore. I'm going to take it into my own hands. I don't join any dating app. They just feel kind of stupid. But instead, I start going to open mics, story slams. I start cooking. I start going on Instagram Live and just talking about shit all day. I'm doing all of these things where I am finally seeing myself, hearing myself, sharing myself unapologetically. And then I see this ad on Facebook for this matchmaking service. It's $29.99 for a year, so I think, why not? I create a profile, and this time, I give them damn context. I'm not a financial consultant. I'm a storyteller. And I like cooking because I love poetry because I am here because. And then I just leave it aside. I don't really think I'm going to hear much from it until I get a text about 6 months later from some matchmaker who's actually a 20-year-old in Vermont somewhere. She tells me that she has a client that would be a good match for me and invites me to a Zoom call. I get on. Now look, when my parents met one another, their families had done all of the due diligence. Like, genetic history was mapped. Ancestral lineage was completely followed. Astrological charts were transposed over one another. It took them 15 minutes to look at each other and decide that they were going to get married, and 37 years later, they are still married. And in the 15 minutes I spoke to Sarah on Zoom, all I know about this guy is that he is from Wisconsin. He likes Dungeons and Dragons. He went to grad school abroad, and he likes to dance. I don't know what sports teams he likes. I have no clue what podcasts he listens to. And based on Dungeons and Dragons, I don't want to know what music he likes. I don't know how to be this person's person, so I don't. Instead of blow drying my hair, I keep it curly. Instead of buying a new outfit, I wear an old yellow dress in the back of my closet. Instead of doing my makeup all fancy, I put a little mascara on and some blush on my cheeks. I'm looking in the mirror and wondering, what the heck am I going to talk about? But I see myself, and I realize I might not know anything about this guy, but I know that girl. She's pretty awesome. She's got a lot to offer. So, heck, maybe I might marry the guy. Thank you.
As a coda to that story, I've been giving the honor to tell for the first time publicly that Shweta and that guy actually got engaged this week. So they're over there, so congratulations. All right, I don't know about you, but I could use a little glass of wine from the bar. So we're going to take a quick 5-minute break to get your drinks refreshed, and then we'll come back for some more stories. Okay, I hope everyone had a chance to do whatever they needed to do during the break. Now this is my chance to tell a story. It's spring of 2020 and everything is shut down. I'm still working, but working now means that I spend way too much time on Zoom looking at my coworkers. And when I'm not working, I spend way too much time fighting with the dog over the best way to look out the window and see what's going on out there. Like, he's interested in the squirrels, and I'm interested in seeing the people. And there are a lot more walkers out there now. You know, I see them walking up and down the street, and there are a lot of people I don't recognize, which is fine. I just like seeing them, but I can't help but notice that a lot of these walkers, they're walking kind of like all hunched over and timid. It's kind of like they're fleeing from something. Now, my own way to exercise when I'm outside is I've rededicated myself to running. I used to run before the pandemic, and now during the pandemic, I run. Let me be clear, it's not because I like running at all. It's because spending so much time in the house for all those hours is so terrible. I just need to get out and see something new and experience something different. And I'm lucky because I live right near a bike path. It's the bike path that's right up the road here, the Manhattan Bike Trail. And I spend a lot of time on the bike path. But what's interesting is that we're now in the middle of the pandemic and everyone is an amateur epidemiologist. And I know that because everybody is avoiding me. Like, I'll be running on the bike path and someone will see me and they'll cover up their mouth if they don't already have a mask on and they'll step to the side. And I do the same thing. Like, I'm going on the bike path and I like weave around people, and as I do that, I hold my breath as if that's going to do anything. And if I'm running and someone's coming the other way, we'll lock eyes. And in the before times, you know, after we locked eyes, there would be like a wave or a nod or something like that, something to acknowledge our shared humanity. But now I can see the eyes above the mask. They're shifting back and forth, and I know what they're doing. They're calculating, like, what are the odds that this guy has the virus? How unclean is this guy? And then when I wasn't running on the bike path, I was running down the road here to the pond, by the pond, and it was one of those runs, it was great because my music was synced up to my mood and everything was feeling good. And I looked down and I noticed a woman just as she noticed me, and she was like 100 yards away from me. And the way she was going, we weren't going to cross paths. But she saw me, and she just turned, and she made a beeline right for me. And I knew why. I just like instinctively knew why. It's because I wasn't wearing a mask. But the guidelines didn't say I had to wear a mask while I was exercising. But she took it upon herself to come up, and when we got close, she started berating me for not wearing a mask. And I guess she felt like she had to take on the responsibility of all of humanity by reminding me of why I should wear a mask. This running thing, it wasn't as therapeutic as I was hoping it was going to be. So one day, I'm fighting with the dog to look out the window, and I notice a guy across the street that I haven't seen before. And he's walking unlike the other walkers that I've seen. He's walking with his head held high, and he's swinging his arms high, and he's got a reusable bag in one of his hands, and I stop and see him pick up trash with that. I mean, this guy exuded positivity, and for the first time I understood why the dog would bark at squirrels, because I wanted to throw open the window and say to this guy, "Hey, wait up, I want to go walk with you." And then the next morning, I was out running and I saw him again, and he was across the street, and I was running, and he saw me and I saw him, and I waved to him, and he waved back, and it felt great. And I couldn't really explain it. But then a couple days later, I saw him again, and I switched to running in the morning because I figured, like, well, he's a morning walker. If I run in the morning, I'm going to see him. And then a couple days later, I'm out driving with my fiance, and I see the guy walking down the street, and I get all excited. And I say, "Look, that's the guy." And she says, "Who's that? What are you talking about?" "That's the guy I wave to every day." And she didn't know what I was talking about. And then, you know, summer turned into fall, and the time changed, and it was harder to run in the morning before work. But whenever I would do it, I would see him. And I know that I could have stopped. I could have introduced myself. But I'm running and I got my headphones in, and let's face it, it would just be kind of weird if I just stopped and said, "Hey, I'm Andrew." And in reality, it's because I felt like I was back in middle school and I didn't know how to make friends with anybody. And also, let's face it, the pandemic made it so that I didn't know how to act around people. So I never did that. And then the pandemic went on, and then eventually things started to open up again. And one of the things that returned around here was the hot chocolate run. Now, the hot chocolate run is a 5K, takes place in Northampton, and thousands of people turn out to run in this race. And I've run it every year except for the year when the pandemic shut it down. So it was back, and I was excited. And I'm walking down to the starting line, and I'm just trying to get there in time when this guy appears in front of me. It's him. And I stop and I say, "It's you." And he says, "No, it's you." And then we go through this weird little dance where it's like, well, we don't really know each other, so we can't hug. And we can't shake hands because it's a pandemic. We try to fist bump, and we really failed at that. And we end up doing this like weird chicken wing thing where we like touch elbows. And I find out that his name is Don, and his last name is the same name as the street that I live on, which is pretty cool. And he lives 2 blocks away from me, and he grew up in Easthampton, which is where I live. And it's great. And then it's time for us to get to the starting line. So we start walking to the starting line, but he has to go to a different starting chute than I do. So we say, okay, well, that's okay. We know each other now. We're gonna stay in touch, and we're gonna talk to each other soon. And I never saw him again. That's not accurate. I saw him again, but we never talked again. But now when I run and I see him, he still waves at me and I still wave back. And I will forever be grateful for that little bit of humanity that he shared with me. Thank you. Look, it's me again. Thank you for that. Our next teller, don't make me get the bouncer out here. Our next teller is Rana Levy. Now, Rana says that she may be a Brooklyn girl, but she is a lifelong Boston Red Sox fan. That means you have to root for her, which I know you're going to do. She's a Moth Story Slam winner and a 99-second Story Slam winner, and she's appeared on Stories from the Stage. She's also the producer of Just One More Thing, a monthly storytelling show in New York City. She also brings me real Brooklyn bagels whenever I see her. So welcome to the stage, Rana Levy.
Got a little bit. Not too much. Oh, all right. That's good, yeah? Okay. So I'm walking my dog to the park. It's about 7 in the morning, and I get this great idea. I want to text my neighbor May upstairs, and I think that we should go out to dinner tonight. It's March 16th, and our mayor has ordered all the restaurants and bars in New York City to close tonight for the pandemic lockdown. So I'm thinking, we should go out to eat. It's probably going to be the last time we can go out for a while, right? So I get my cell phone out of my pocket, and I got to take my glove off because I have to, touch the phone. I got the leash in my hand, and it's too many moving parts. I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna text her when I get to the park. So I put my phone back in my pocket. I get to the park, dog's off the leash, running around, my hands are free. Great, I'm gonna text May. In my pocket, there's no phone. I check all my pockets, there's no phone. I'm not panicking. So I tell my dog mom friend, listen, just call my number. I should hear it, right? She calls, nothing. She calls again, nothing. I'm like, okay, I probably dropped it on the way out. I said, listen, can you just watch my dog? I'm gonna retrace my steps to the beginning of the park, but keep calling because I'll hear it. And I'm walking to the edge of the park, and I don't hear anything. and I know she's calling. And now I'm starting to like panic a little bit because I need my phone because I know that there's this pandemic thing happening. And I mean, I heard the Apple stores are closed. I can't even get a new phone even if I want to get a phone. And I know that, I mean, I heard that people are getting sick, that people are on ventilators, that people are dying. And like, what if I have to call 911? What if I have to call my brother? I mean, what if I can't breathe, but I make it upstairs to my neighbor May? I don't even know anybody's phone numbers because they're locked in my contacts. So I'm a little past panicky now, and I start walking back, and I start making these deals with God. You know, like, please, God, please, if you just let me find my phone, I promise when we get back to campus and school opens up, I will not steal any more gel pens. Just let me find my phone. And I mean, God, please, I'm so honest. I'm so honest, God. Last week, remember when I got my Visa bill and I saw this charge that I didn't know was mine, and I called up Visa and I said it was a fraud, and they took it off, and then I remembered it was the Kate Spade sparkly Keds that I bought last week. And I call Visa and I say, put it back on, it's me, I'll really pay it. That's how honest I am, God. And I walk back into the park. And my dog mom friend is still calling. And someone picks up. And this lady found my phone on the sidewalk. And she took it with her to her work. And she works way uptown at Mount Sinai. And I'm way downtown in Brooklyn. And I'm like, oh, God, why the hell does she have to work up there? Because now I'm looking at like an hour subway ride. And I got to get the dog home, I got to feed him, I got to shower, I got to eat. I got a Zoom meeting at 1 o'clock because we're starting to teach online, and so all the teachers are having a meeting, and I can't make it uptown and backtown by 1 o'clock. And I start getting overwhelmed, like, how am I going to do all this? How am I going to do all this? And I can't, and then I feel like I'm in the second grade when Mrs. Sheriff put 7 questions on the board, and I sat in my seat, and I cried. I didn't think I could do it all. It's too much. That's how I feel. I breathe. I go home. I go to half my meeting, and I head uptown. So now, as I'm walking to the subway, I'm thinking, I was raised. When you visit someone or someone did something nice, you bring them a gift, right? And as I'm walking to the subway, there's nothing open except the liquor store. I don't know, maybe she's an alcoholic. I don't want to buy her a bottle of wine. And I see insomnia cookies. So I go in and I say, just give me a dozen cookies. And they're all fresh and they're warm. So he puts the cookies in like a flat pizza box because he can't, layer them on top of each other. And as he's giving me the cookies, he says, do you have a peanut allergy? You gotta be kidding me. The pandemic won't kill this lady. I'm gonna kill her with a peanut cookie. I'm like, just give me the cookies. I take them, so now I'm balancing this like pizza box of hot cookies, and I'm going to the subway, and I go downstairs, and I get my Metro card out, and I swipe it, and it says, insufficient fare. Okay, so now I have to go over to the vending machine to refill my card. So I go over there, and I got this pizza box. So I put the pizza box against my belly, and I put the other end, and I balance it like on the machine, so I'm like this, and I put the pocket, and I get the new card, and I go downstairs, I get in the subway train. So now I'm like sitting on the edge of my seat, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, is that person sick? Is that person sick? Am I gonna get sick? I don't know what to do. And I'm like, we're not wearing masks at this point. And I'm so preoccupied with what's going on that I get off 20 blocks too early. So now I gotta balance this pizza box, like up Madison Avenue. I get to the hospital, to Mount Sinai. She works in an office. I give her the cookies. She doesn't have a peanut allergy. She gives me my phone. We don't know whether we can shake hands or we can hug, and we just kind of smile and laugh, and I thank her, and I get back on the train, and I'm holding my phone. It's not going in a pocket. It's staying in my hand. And I still want to text my friend. I get back to my house. I text my friend. This is what we should do. We walk our dogs, and we go out to eat. And we're in this restaurant. We don't even know what to do. We're wiping our hands with sanitizer. We're wiping down the knife and the fork. We don't know. But I'm sitting there. I got it all done. And it feels good because now I get to pay it forward. I get to order a nice meal, give the restaurant my business, give this waiter a nice tip. And just for that moment, the world seemed like everything was going to be okay. Thank you.
All right. We have come to the last storyteller of the evening, all the way from Montreal, Canada. She's chomping at the bit to get up here, but I have to introduce her first. Joanne Pelletier works in communications in Montreal and performs as a story in Canada, the United States. She's going to be featured this year on Stories from the Stage by WGBH. She's the winner of the Grit 99-Second Story Slam, and she's the producer of Good Guy, Bad Guy, Women's Health Stories. She also teaches storytelling to scientists and startups. And this is the best part. When she's not thinking about the next story, she is a certified boxing official. Please welcome Joanne Pelletier.
Hi. I'm in the waiting room for surgery. Now, because of the pandemic, I couldn't bring friends and family with me. But even if they could come with me, they can't be right here because this is the patient-only area. It's the last stop before the OR. It's where you give up your phone and your clothes. You put them in a locker and you get a hospital gown. I get two, one for my front and one for my back, and gauzy coverings for my head and feet. There are three of us here. Me and two men in their 50s, separated by pandemic-safe chairs. Now, there's nothing to do here. There's no magazines, no telephones, just the hum of ventilation and staff chatting in the distance. There's something I know about myself. When I'm nervous, I get chatty, like more social. Like in an airport, when the flight is delayed, for sure I'm the first person commiserating with my neighbor about what a drag this is. So here, yeah, I'm nervous, and I feel this weird kinship with these two men. I mean, in the absence of anyone else here, we're completely alone at a time when you kind of want to have someone with you, right? I do. So I turn to the guy on my right. Hey, what are you in for? I know it sounds like I'm in a prison holding cell. He says, prostate. What about you? I say hysterectomy. And the guy on my left just pops his head out and he joins the conversation. He says, colon cancer. I say, oh, it's lower body day in the OR. Nobody laughs. So I focus my attention on the lockers in front of me. They all have these very carefully prepared labels, and one of them says kidney basins and post-op sponges, like surgery stuff. But the locker right next to it says Christmas decorations. But the T in Christmas is missing, and I'm fixated on it. And I say to the guys, isn't this a funny combination of stuff? And look at the T, and I'm nervously chatting, right? The T in Christmas is missing. They don't respond. It's okay, I know everyone does nervous differently. So we just sit there and we shuffle our feet, and I'm trying to make sure nothing is sticking, to the vinyl chairs, and we wait. And I hear my name called, and I meet Dave, the orderly. He comes over and he says, Ms. Pelletier, your chariot awaits. And he points to a big gurney thing, and I climb into it, and I'm like, wow, Dave, this is great. It's all warm. And Dave says he preheats all the bedding for patients because It's cold in the surgical area. So he tucks me in, and I wave good luck to colon and prostate. And Dave and I are on the move, and we arrive at the surgical area, and he positions me in front of a very large, sunny window. It's next to the entrance to the operating room. It's a nice view from here. I can see out. Of course, I'm chatting. I tell Dave, that's my neighborhood out there. I can't see my house, but I live right out there close to the hospital. And Dave, it's nice out there. And Dave says, they'll be with you soon. It won't be much longer. He walks away. Look, the thing is, the guides they give you about the surgery, like what to wash and how to wash it and what to eat and not to eat, they never tell you about this part. The space in between, the time when you're just in a hallway by yourself. You're nearly naked, and you're cold or hot, and you're just waiting. And I wonder if people just bolt right now. Do they change their minds? I think about my surgery. I put my hand on my belly. These organs I've had all my life, my uterus, my cervix, my ovaries, they're going today. I'm not going to bolt. I'm doing this because I have to, because I have symptoms that suggest ovarian cancer. I'm in pain. It's serious. I'm scared. The surgeon arrives. She introduces the whole team. They ask if they can open my gown, review the area. This is a very polite, modern medicine gesture, given that I'm going to be out cold and naked in a few minutes in the operating room. Of course, I say yes, and they show me where the cut's going to be. They reassure me it'll be soon. They close my gown, and the surgeon puts her hand on my shoulder and says, close your eyes, try to relax. It's good advice. I close my eyes, and I try to think about what's out there, out that window, beyond where I am right now, my neighborhood, my street, my house, my living room, my cat Spike. I try to imagine that the sun coming in on me right now on this stretcher gurney thing is just the sun coming in on me in my living room, that I'm just lounging there. And I think about Christine, my girlfriend. I think about the first night we danced after dinner in my living room. I love her playlists, like French auteur pop and modern dance music, always better than mine. I think about how she made me laugh that night, the both of us recreating our dance moves from the 80s, long before we met, but I know we were in the same bars back then, and I just love that thumping distraction of a dance beat. I think about how I want to tell her about this moment, but I'm thinking about her, our dancing, and the gurney moves. And I wake, open my eyes, and Dave is covering me with more newly warmed blankets. Dave, why are we moving? He says, I don't think you should see the opening to the operating room. It's better if you don't see the last patient coming out, not just for you, for everyone. I want to ask him about this more, but he turns away from me and he turns on a radio. Dave, you're kidding me. The song that comes on, it's the opening beats to Fever by Dua Lipa. Dave, I love this song. He says, I love this song too. And I tell him about Christine and the night we met, and I tell him about dancing in the living room. Christine introduced me to Dua Lipa and this song, and I tell him about her sweet embrace. I tell him I love her. And he takes my hand, and he starts to sway at the side of the stretcher. I kick my feet loose from the blankets, and I stretcher dance along with Dave. I got a fever, can you check? Hand on my forehead, kiss my neck. I got here alone, but I'm not alone. She's with me. I have Dave. I almost forgot where I was, but I can't, because out of the corner of my eye, I do see the stretcher coming out of the operating room. What is it about that song? Was it Dave's magical way of distracting me? Or is it the kismet of a really good dance song? The one that drops exactly when you need it. The song ends, and the surgeon's at my side, and Dave tucks me back in, and now he says, good luck, because now I'm next. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. That was amazing. Yeah, you're right. So there is a concept in the art world called ephemeral art, which is the idea that you don't make a piece of art that endures forever. It just kind of happens and then it goes away. And I was thinking about that as Joanne was telling her story about how this night has been a piece of ephemeral art because we're never going to be able to recreate it, and it has been awesome. And I just want to thank you for sharing that night with me and with all of our tellers. So let's give one more round of applause. Thank you for coming. Feel free to hang out. There's a band coming on in a few minutes, and have a great night, everybody. Thank you.